Well, good morning, everybody. You probably tell by my voice I'm not from around here, right? So I'm not a magician, I'm not from around here, so why the heck am I here? Maybe you're asking, well, I think maybe it's because I'm related to movie stars. That's my best hypothesis. How many of you have seen the movie Field of Dreams? Anybody see Field of Dreams? That was filmed about 20 miles from my parents' farm. So my brother and sister are in the movie. Remember seeing them by any chance? In two of the cars at the end of the movie, they descend on the field in two of the cars. They got a free picnic lunch out of the deal. Pretty good deal, huh? So I think I know something about growing corn. I know something about growing hay and milking cows and taking care of pigs, because that was the kind of farm I had growing up. But I'll be the first to tell you I know very little about growing peanuts. So I very much appreciated the invitation last June, to come down and have a chance to learn a bit more about the production process, the processing process here, et cetera. And I feel like I know a lot more about the industry now than I did a year ago, but much, much more to learn. Please tell me more today as I go along. Let me find my clicker here. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a little advertising up front probably, and then we'll talk about the meat of what I want to talk about today about the agricultural markets and the Farm Bill. So FAPRI, the Food and Ag Policy Research Institute, who are we? So we do analysis of agricultural markets and policies, try to do an objective manner as best we can. We were founded in the early 1980s. Original partners with the University of Missouri and Iowa State University. I got my PhD from Iowa State a couple years ago. Current consortium includes researchers not just at MU, but also at Texas A&M, Texas Tech, University of Arkansas, and lots of other places around the country, in fact, around the world. We get most of our current funding from USDA's Office of Chief Economist. Each year we put out a 10-year projection for the farm economy. In some ways like USDA's projections, but we do it independently. We get different numbers. We have different ways of doing things. We do analysis of alternative scenarios. So just a couple days ago, for example, we're looking at some trade-related issues, dealing with the tariffs from China and Mexico, what those might mean for the farm economy here. We look at different things that might happen to the farm and what those might imply. We do not make policy recommendations. Probably the reason we've been able to do this for the last 30-some years is that we aren't taking sides in these debates. We're trying to provide objective analysis as best we can, get the information in front of folks so they can make the best possible decisions. So let's start with the bottom line in terms of where we seem to be going in agriculture as a whole in this country. Left-hand chart's giving you net farm income for the country, either in nominal terms in the green line or in real terms in the blue line. So you saw we had that peak back in 2013 when we had very high prices for a lot of crops. In 2014 was down a bit because livestock picked up, but crops got worse, and we've been downhill since. So by 2016, we had roughly half the level of net farm income in this country that we had just 3 years previously. And we've been stuck around that level now for 3 straight years. So not a happy time compared to where we thought we might be going. If you see our projections there, we do have a little bit of an uptick projected for 2019, not a great one, but at least a little bit of an uptick, but then pretty flat thereafter. And that was what we did back in January of this past year based on what we thought we knew back then. That was before all the tariff stuff hit the news. And I'll tell you right now, if we were to do a new update today, it would probably show a lower level of farm income in front of us than we had back in January, just because of the market effects of those tariffs that have gone into place at this point. Right-hand chart showing the government outlays. So I won't go through the finer points of this. The bottom part of it's going to be your basic farm programs like ARC and PLC. The bluish part's going to be crop insurance costs to federal taxpayers. The green's going to be the conservation programs. The yellow is like disaster and other odds and ends at the top there. So you can see we're below the peak levels we had back in 2013 and 2014. Those peak levels were driven by the drought in the Midwest in 2012 that drove crop insurance costs. Came down a lot from that. We're back up again now. We're increasing a little bit in front of us given our projections, but nothing dramatic. It's kind of continuing more or less where we've been the last several years. So looking at the big crops, the corn, soybeans, and wheat, the 3 largest crops in this country. Here's our projections from back in January. Back given what we knew at that time, we expected soybean prices to average between $9 and $10 a bushel over the next decade. Wheat prices around $5 a bushel. Corn between $3.50 and $4. It's pretty similar to the prices we've seen the last 2 or 3 years. We all know, of course, that the weather and many other things are going to intervene. That we're going to have a very different situation each year than we thought we were going to have because of weather, if nothing else. And so we actually solve our models 500 times for different combinations of the weather, demand, etc. And therefore talk about not just these levels I'm showing you here, but also a distribution, a range of possible prices in front of us. That range is still pretty wide. You could easily see a sub $3 corn price in a given year. You could easily see an over $5 corn price in a given year. Those are very possible just given ordinary weather variation. The same would be true for other crops as well. And of course, this was all done before the trade disputes really heated up. Our baseline always assumes current policy. Current policy back in January didn't have those trade disputes the way they are today. So if we were doing this a new set of numbers today, we'd probably have lower prices for at least things like soybeans. So if you see where markets were last Thursday, I think it was, and they're not that terribly different than that as of this morning. We see on the left-hand chart is going to give you the price of corn the last several years, marketing year average, and the red line is going to be USDA's numbers that just came out a week ago. The blue lines are our projections back in January, so we're a little bit weaker in 17 and 18 than USDA is today. That's easy to explain. Argentina had a far smaller corn crop this year than we thought they were going to, and because of that, prices have been, until recently, a bit higher. Now, of course, the trade disputes have come back down again. The green line there in the middle is going to be the futures price. So December 2018 is the first out there. December 2019, December 20, December 21 futures contracts as of last week. You can see they're not that terribly different than our own projections, especially when you take into account the fact that there's usually a little bit of a basis between the futures price and the farm price. So on corn, we're telling about the same story way back in January as the markets are saying today. In the case of soybeans, that's true. That's not true. So in the case of soybeans, you can see our projections are in the $9.50, $10 range in front of us every year. Actual markets as of last week and again as of this morning are quite a bit lower than that. That's also very easy to explain. The Chinese soybean tariffs have gone into place and have probably knocked a fair amount off the soybean price, like just how much in a few minutes, and that's kept prices a bit lower for that major crop. Let's talk about planted acreage a little bit. So the left-hand column is going to be the 2017 actual planted acreage for corn, soybeans, wheat, and peanuts. So 1.87 million acres of peanuts planted in 2017, USDA says. You see corn and soybeans are both around 90 million acres, see the number there for wheat. Most market analysts going into this year expected there to be an increase in soybean acreage, a drop in corn acreage, and not much change in wheat. We were kind of the outliers of lots of the other folks who do what we do for a living, and that we were actually projecting a bit of a decline in both corn and soybeans this year, a bit of an uptick in wheat. We didn't get it exactly right. You can see the numbers comparing the 2018 column, the second column there to the final column, but we were relatively close, within 1 million acres each in the case of corn, soybeans, and wheat. That's not bad by our standards, we think. Look at the peanut line. We were projecting back in January 1.7 million acres of peanuts planted this year. Now, since January, since the time we did those numbers in January, of course, we had the balanced budget bill or the budget act that passed this past spring that changed the cotton program in some pretty major ways, created the new seed cotton program. And we think, and a lot of other people think, that probably will have helped to reduce peanut acreage a little bit. So just taking that into account, we would have had about 1.61 million acres planted this year. The new numbers that came out from USDA as of June 30th said the actual reported numbers that they got in their survey was 1.5. So still a bit lower than we had said as well, but in the same ballpark, certainly the same direction as what had been anticipated. In terms of peanut supply and demand, the first column here is going to give you the average for 2014, 15, and 16 crops. And we've got the 2017 level, the 2018 level, both as reported by USDA, and then our projections on average for the 2019 to 2023 period, the 5 years that would be covered by the next farm bill. So if you focus on the 2017 column, first of all, the year we're just wrapping up this next week, we had 7.2 billion pounds of peanuts produced according to USDA. 3.2 billion pounds of that went into food uses, 1.7 into crushed seed and other residual uses, 1.3 billion pounds were exported, and an average price of $465 a ton. USDA reported in June, and I just checked their July numbers, didn't change. So those are the same projections in their July estimates that they just put out this past week. For 2018, USDA was projecting in June, and hasn't changed their mind too much about this at this point, about 6.1 billion pounds produced, reduced acreage, takes a fair chunk off of production this year. 3.2 billion pounds for food, 1.7 for those other uses, 1.2 of exports. So export sales actually down year over year, and a price of $425 a ton. Those are all USDA projections. I don't take responsibility for them. That's their numbers, okay? Then the final column I do have to take responsibility for. These are our projections for the 2019 to 2023 period on average for those 5 years. And they were done, again, taking into account the seed cotton provisions that are now part of law. So you can see we're projecting a little more production, a little more use, and a little higher price than we're expected to see in 2018-19, but all those changes are relatively small. Now, again, I certainly know that we're going to have a different situation in reality, and I'm very eager to hear your comments about what you like and don't like about those projections, what you think makes sense and what doesn't make sense. We're going to be coming back in August, and as soon as USDA's crop report comes out in August, there's some new estimates based on more current information. So again, input you provide us will help us, think about that more carefully when the time comes. So let's talk about things that relate to the Farm Bill, why the Farm Bill is so important. We heard a good story from Ken about how important it is to jobs and employment and revenue and so on here in this part of the country. Let's just think about it from a producer level standpoint here for a second. Between 2014 and 2016, for those 3 marketing years, on a national average basis, just taking the average price of peanuts multiplied by the average yield of peanuts for the country as a whole, that was $774 an acre for those 3 years, based on USDA data. The average PLC payment for that same period of time, 14, 15, and 16 crops, was $176 an acre for the country as a whole, if we've done the math correctly. Now, I know that base acreage and planted acreage are not the same thing, I understand that, but just for sake of argument, assume you've got somebody who's got 1 acre of base for every acre they planted. That would be $950 an acre of total revenue for that farm. Given the projections I just talked about for prices, and assuming a continuation of current policies, then what's implied by our projections for 2019 to 2023 is about $905 an acre of revenues from selling peanuts, $156 an acre of PLC payments, for total revenues of $1,061 per acre, nationwide average, given all sorts of assumptions, of course. Okay, so not dramatically different than where we've just been. By the time you account for rising production costs, maybe no better at all in terms of net revenues, but nevertheless, at least a little more total revenue coming in front of us. So I was thinking about this though across crops. Oops, there we go. So if you look at PLC payment rates, so again, the green bars are going to be what actually occurred between 2014 and 2016. Those should be very close to being correct, based on at least the official data that's been reported. So for corn, the average PLC payment rate was just $13 an acre. For soybeans, there were no PLC payments during that period of time. We never had a soybean price below $8.40 a bushel. Wheat was about $22 an acre. Rice was $139, and peanuts was $176, according to USDA reported data. Given our projections, we would project that over 500 possible ways the future could happen, the average level of payments over the next 5 years would be about $27 an acre for corn, $10 an acre for soybeans, $23 an acre for wheat, $152 for rice, and $156 for peanuts. So peanuts is about the only major crop where the projected payment's a bit less than the payment was between the first 3 years of the Farm Bill. But you can see the overall levels there are very different for peanuts and rice than they are for corn, soybeans, and wheat. Suppose we look just focusing on corn, soybeans, and peanuts now, throwing ARC into the mix now. We reported the corn PLC numbers already. For corn ARC, they got a lot of payments the first couple of years in many parts of the country. $42 an acre on average for those first couple of years, given how many corn acres are in the country. That was billions and billions of dollars. A lot bigger dollar figure for the nation as a whole, obviously, than any peanut number there might be. But on a per acre basis, you can see how peanuts compares to the others here. You notice that in front of us, we project that if current law were to simply be continued and farmers were given a new choice in 2019 about what program they want to enroll in, it seems to us pretty likely that a lot of corn farmers who signed up for ARC last time might sign up for PLC the next time, because the expected PLC payments are larger than expected ARC payments in front of us, given the way the formulas work. Soybeans is a tougher call. Payments are small either way for soybeans, at least given the projections that we did back in March, given the conditions. Comparing payments and market receipts, again, over a period of time, so you can see the corn column there is going to, if you were a corn ARC participant, the first one there, and the projections of $11 an acre payments. You can see that's roughly 2% of producer revenue for a corn farmer if they choose ARC over the next 5 years. If they chose PLC, those PLC payments are about 4% of producer revenue. If you're a soybean farmer choosing ARC, it's about 2%. It's about 2% as well if they were to choose PLC. So in all those those cases, a Midwestern farmer or your Southern farmer is not going to get a lot of payments for corn and for soybeans, it looks like to us, if current program provisions continue relative to their overall farm income levels. Whereas for peanuts, it's a much larger share of income. The $156 per acre payment would be roughly 15% of total revenue for a farmer who's selling peanuts and has an acre base for an acre planted. I don't have crop insurance estimates for peanuts there, but you see the crop insurance numbers there for corn and soybeans. Yes, they're substantial, but even considering those, you still have a pretty big discrepancy between the share of income farmers get from these programs for peanuts than they do for the other crops. Some other considerations. Trade disputes, of course, could affect future, let me back up a second. I meant to go back here. There we go. Implications for these estimates for this and future farm bills. So the baseline estimates here assume no change in current law. Make that clear. We are going to have a new farm bill, may or may not be passed this year. The debate has already begun on the conference report on the farm bill. The House has moved to go to that conference. The Senate will probably do so here relatively shortly. Staff are already meeting, trying to figure things out as best they can. Good news, bad news is there's not a lot of difference between the two bills in terms of most major commodity provisions, with a few very important exceptions like payment limitations. Per acre PLC payment rates have been and are projected to be much larger than those for other crops, with the exception of rice. So while it appears that has not really caused any big issues politically in this farm bill, looks like we're going to probably roll forward current reference prices across the board if where things stand now, here's where we end up. There's always going to be the vulnerability in front of you of people concerned about those relative payment rates. Farm program payments are a much larger share of producer income for peanuts than they are for many other commodities, with the exception of rice. And so therefore, Title I matters more to peanut producers than it does to corn and soybean producers. You have a much larger stake in those arguments. And therefore, you have to make your case as best you can if you want those to be continued in front of us. So if there were to be changes in reference prices, changes in payment limitation rules, and changes in ARC and PLC in general, those have a bigger proportional impact on peanut producers than they do on producers of many other commodities. So some other considerations, again, trade disputes have been in the news a lot recently. Just to take a for example, USDA soybean projections for 2018-19 were revised quite a bit in the July estimates that came out compared to June. The difference between June and July was primarily because we had the tariffs the Chinese put in place, actually took effect. So they're now, current policy, they're built into USDA's baseline and our own. And we also had the news about just how many acres of soybeans were planted last year. So the soybean extra plantings that occurred only add another 30 million bushels to soybean supplies, USDA says, as long as we have average yields. Through the exports, though, exports are down 250 million bushels month over month. Now, that's not all China, but it's probably largely China. So the net of all that is a big change in ending stocks. They have 385 million bushels of ending stocks of soybeans at the end of the marketing year next September 1. USDA is currently estimating 580 million bushels of soybeans. I think that's too high myself. I don't really buy all of these numbers, but I do think the price impact is obviously already in the market. USDA's price range was reduced by 75 cents a bushel from one month to the next. While other factors played a part, the Chinese soybean tariffs are probably the single most important reason for the adjustment in their estimates. We've done our own work on this. I don't have anything I can share publicly about that, but I'll just say that the price impacts that USDA has here are very consistent with our own estimates of how much difference those new tariffs might actually mean. And then just add a couple final points. Budget, of course, the budget's always going to be an issue going forward. I've been frankly surprised that there hasn't been more concerted effort to reduce federal spending this past couple of years. We'll see where things go in front of us. Current projections by CBO, even projections by the administration itself, are that the federal budget deficit will be larger in fiscal 2019 than it was in 18. 18 is larger than 17, 17 was larger than 16. So after a number of years of declining federal budget deficits, they've now been increasing and are expected to increase another couple of years at least in front of us, even if things go the way people want them to go in other respects. So you could see additional pressure at some point in the future on the budget side. And of course, just very importantly, there's always going to be surprises. Again, I've been doing this for a very long time. I keep telling folks I'm going to keep doing projections till I get them right. And that means I'll never retire. because we're never going to get it right, okay? We have to make assumptions that will not prove to be what happens in reality. And so we always have to prepare for surprises. We try to do the best job we can of providing information we think makes sense and that will help folks make more informed decisions when the time comes. With that, I want to thank you all for the opportunity again today. There's our group at the University of Missouri who works on this with us. I have a great group that I've been very fortunate to work with over the years, and we hope to keep doing this for a long time to come. Thank you again. I'd be happy to take questions at this time.